congressional statute that was passed right after the end of slavery to deliberately control the black population. They wanted to keep the population at zero growth. Since the end of American slavery, there has been a deliberate plan to try to reduce and eliminate the population of Africans that come to this country. That's precisely why when immigrants escape from Cuba and Haiti to come to America, the Cubans are allowed in and the Haitians are sent back. See, the problem with us is they don't know what to do with us. You can't send us nowhere else. Anybody else can be sent home. You see, why they let the Chinese come in here and buy up the country? Because when they get tired of them, they can send them back. Okay? They get tired of the East Indian, they can send them back. They get tired of the Mexican, they can send them back. But the Africans, you built this. You are the only non-European in this country who has more of a right to be here than he does. So you just can't say, well, we send all y'all back to Africa. You can't, because we the original American as well. So since we can't get rid of you that way, we got to come up with other more clever strategies to reduce your numbers and control you.
If you're an older black person, you'll remember when you were a kid, your parents would always tell you to get home before the street light came on. That was a rule in the black community for years. That rule came from the sundown rule. That was like this unwritten policy for a long time in America where black people were not allowed to go to certain cities around the country or be in certain towns after 6 o'clock. When the street light came on, black people had to be out of these cities or you could get lynched, killed, arrested, or whatever. There's a great book about this called Sundown Towns by a guy named James Loewen. He talks about all of these cities around America that had these unwritten sundown laws, and they literally had signs saying that black people don't let the sun get down on you here in this city. And this was all over the country, not just in the South. A lot of people think that the South just had all of these racist laws, and a lot of these sundown cities were in the North.
And what they're designed to do, they serve multiple purposes. One is to keep the black community in place. It is to know that at any time you can get God, and that there is nobody coming to rescue you. The sheriff's not coming, because sometimes the sheriff's in on it. The state's not coming, because the state's like really cool with that. The feds aren't coming, because the feds are like, well, this looks like a states' rights issue to me. And besides, we don't want to get involved in that. Nobody's coming to rescue you.
Well, you've seen those famous pictures where you see those kids, those children smiling at some black person, man or woman, being burnt and lynched. That's unforgettable. It's insane. It's a form of insanity. It's airborne. It's a sickness.
But with spectacle lynchings, they were an event, and they would announce the lynching. They would order special trains because everybody wanted to see this lynching. And so they could get people to the lynching site. They'd sell tickets, and they would announce it in church. So they're reading the announcements. Oh, and so on Easter Sunday we're going to have da 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 da. And on Monday, right after Easter, there's going to be a lynching of a Negro. Special tickets will be sold. Be sure to bring your picnic baskets.
Concepts of pick a nigger becomes picnic. They would have festivals, and the entertainment was to kill a person of African descent. This is who we're dealing with.
W.E.B. Du Bois talks about, he was writing this letter to the editor. He was really upset about something, and he's walking down the street to hand this letter in, and he looks in the window, the storefront, and there are the knuckles, Sam Hose's knuckles, a black man who was lynched and dismembered. His knuckles are on display as a kind of wonderful trophy. Look what we have here. And this is when Du Bois is like, oh, this is deeper than I even thought about.
It goes back. The Romans had a thing about putting African people on wood. They called it crucifixion. Moving aside from the religious concept, historically speaking, that did occur. But they didn't put them on a cross, they put them on an X. Hands and feet spread. And the taking of their genitals and the cutting of their bodies, the organs, and all and eating. Vlad the Impaler put people on wood. They enjoy the relationship of blackness and people to wood.
Envy, jealousy, envy of the power that you as a black man have. That's why they always wanted to castrate you, because the sperm that you carried could completely eliminate their race and nationality. That's a lot of power because they can't make nothing but their own kind. You can make any kind.
They always try to put something, blame some area. It's all America. If you're in Mississippi, or if you're in California, if you're in California is a myth. They're always pretending California is very liberal and, you know. I think Mississippi burned what, once? Maybe twice. During Martin Luther King and Kennedy. Maybe twice, 2 or 3 times, I don't know. But up north, California has burned what? You don't have enough fingers to count.
The North gets a pass. The North gets a big pass. So, you know Mississippi. But you think about what King talked about when he went up to Chicago and hit Cicero, Illinois. And he's like, ooh, this is worse than Mississippi.
Well, this is a terrible thing. I've been in many demonstrations all across the South. But I can say that I have never seen, even in Mississippi and Alabama, mobs as hostile and as hate-filled as I've seen in Chicago.
And all these things come about at the same time. The 70s. Right after the 60s was over, America said we could never let this happen again. We had Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Huey P. Newton. The Black Power struggle and the Civil Rights Movement wore America out. It wore them out. When that was over, they said we ain't never going to go through this again.
If it had melanin and if it wasn't comfortable with being in its place, it was a threat to J. Edgar Hoover, who led the FBI. So J. Edgar Hoover was after Garvey, Marcus Garvey. I mean, you go through the FBI files, they were tracking the NAACP because they thought the NAACP was too radical.
And so J. Edgar Hoover put out or made a black think tank, or he put up a black department in order to monitor all of the so-called charismatic leaders of that time. And he had a file on Martin Luther King. He had a file on Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture. He had a file on Malcolm X. He had a file on the Nation of Islam. In fact, his people had infiltrated the Nation of Islam and all subsequent organizations thereafter.
Marcus Garvey made more money than anybody in history of America that wasn't on the stock market. That's what they busted on.
The reason for so much crime is not white racism, it's because of all of these single black mothers having all of these kids out of wedlock and no fathers are being around. That's the new narrative coming from many of those in the right. And that theory has a lot of holes in it because the black crime rate has always been disproportionately high in America, even before the so-called breakup of the black family in the 1960s. See, before 1964, most black families were together, most black couples were married, so the father was in the home. But the crime stats were still disproportionately high, even going back to the 1920s and 30s, when most black families were together, the crime stats were still disproportionately high by African American people. So why is that? The same reason then is the same reason now. The reason why the crime stats are more high in the black community, because more things are illegal for black people to do. Even then, during the 1920s and 30s, if a black person rode on a certain part of the bus, that was illegal. If you drank from a certain water fountain as a black person, that was illegal. If you were in a certain part of town at night, that was illegal for an African American person. And even now, you have a lot of racially based laws that apply specifically to African American people and not other people. You have stop and frisk that disproportionately targets African American people. You have drug laws that disproportionately target African American people. They have something called the knockout game. There's a new law that they made up out of thin air, and they put that on the African American community. So that's the reason why crime has always been disproportionately high, or the crime stats have been disproportionately high because blacks are disproportionately targeted.
They always say, like, in the summertime, black folk don't act right. It's not that black folk don't act right in the summertime, it's just that black folk come to their senses when it's warm. Because if that were true, Los Angeles would always be in an uproar. What happens is when you're in a warm climate in New York City, those memories are reinvigorated. Those ideas come together. You visit your family more often. You eat the fruits that you used to eat back home. You start to think. And when people try to dominate you, you start saying, wait a minute, no. Psychologically, we go back to ourselves when we're in the climate that we left.
During the 1960s, there was something called the Long Hot Summer Riots. In 1967 alone, there were 100 and some race riots all around the country. So Lyndon B. Johnson, he put together something called the Kerner Commission to try to figure out what was going on, why these riots were going on, why were black people tripping like this so hard? Because black people normally wake up during the summertime. We feel a sense about naturalness, so a lot of black people would wake up during the summer. So they wanted to figure out why black people were rioting at this time so much. So the Kerner Commission came up with the natural answer: black people were fed up with racism. But the government was basically like, okay, look, we've always been racist, so that ain't it. Why are they tripping now? So there was a guy named Moynihan, Senator Moynihan, who was also a sociologist. He came up with the theory, and he said basically, after the Civil Rights Act was signed, America kept making all of these promises to African American people that the government knew they weren't going to keep. They kept telling black people they're going to get equality, equal housing, equal jobs, fair this, equal that. And they knew they weren't going to keep these promises, and black people were getting frustrated and upset because those promises were not being met. So Moynihan came up with a solution. He said, let's put together a public policy called benign neglect. And benign neglect basically means, look, if we don't promise black folks stuff, they won't expect nothing, they can't get mad. So this benign neglect public policy is in place to this very day, and this is why African American issues are never discussed on a national level. And they talk about minority issues as if that's synonymous with African American, and it's not.
There's this guy that wants to start an all-white community out in North Dakota. I told him that you're not gonna be able to make North Dakota the capital of white supremacy. I say we already have one of those. It's called Washington, D.C.